Hey guys, happy Monday, and oh my gosh, happy July. It is July, y'all. It is July. And it is the first time we are coming together in July on the heels of a holiday weekend. We have a brand new month and a brand new theme, which I'm super excited about. And we're going to talk about freedom. Tonight's episode is called Free to Be You and Me. So excited about it. We are listening to Queen Bee herself singing about freedom. How much better does it get than Queen Bee singing about freedom? As you guys are hopping on tonight, please say hi. Let me know who's here. Thank you so much. Can you believe? Can you believe? I'm gonna turn off Queen Bee because I could just sit here and jam all night. But we have stuff to talk about. Can you believe it is 3 months? 3 months. We are starting our third month that we have come together on Mondays to talk about everything from the four pillars of wellness during Mental Health Awareness Month to all the things we talked about in June. And now it is July. It is July, and our theme is Live Your Truth. And I'm so excited to talk about that theme this month and to kick it off with the Free to Be You and Me topic tonight. Hey, babe, thanks for being here. Who else is with us? Let me know you're here. Say hi as you're hopping on. Would love to know who is with us tonight. I am Abra Kurt. Surprise, surprise. You're on my page, so I hope you know that. If you haven't tuned in to hashtag Life in Blissburg before, I am a certified life and wellness coach. I do private one-on-one coaching with clients, and I also do hashtag Life in Blissburg, which is a weekly live interactive, and that's what you see in the comments. Hey, Mama Vicky. Hi, Georgie. Thank you both so much for being here. Happy July. I hope everybody had an awesome holiday weekend. We're going to talk about all of that in a minute. Hey, Therese. Hey, Bob. I'm so glad you guys are here. Hashtag Life in Blissburg. For those of you who might be new and lurking and haven't commented, it's a weekly live interactive like lifestyle show. I'm a mindset coach and lifestyle designer, and it is also an ad hoc kind of informal group coaching opportunity where we talk about a different theme every week that relates to like maybe current events or things that we might be doing seasonally in some way. And then also we talk about some ways that it really resonates personally, and we offer some tips and resources that people can take back and use in daily life. And I hope everybody who tunes in every week gets something out of it, because I know I do. And I am so appreciative of y'all who are coming back week after week. As I said a minute ago, we are heading into our third month of these live casts, and I'm so excited about that. Tonight, you guys, we are kicking off July and Live Your Truth Month with Free to Be You and Me, and a discussion of freedom. Right on the heels of Independence Day and 4th of July weekend. And you guys, I was totally inspired to call the episode Free to Be You and Me. For those of you, is anybody else as old as me and have been around since like the early 70s? Because for those of you who don't know, so Free to Be You and Me was a book and a music project that was a partnership of Marlo Thomas and the Ms. Foundation for Women. And it was this kind of way to teach children about how to just be their own unique, amazing individual selves. And I have the book, and I purchased it for a friend who is expecting her first child. And so as I was wrapping up the book, I just thought, gosh, that's a great title, and I'm going to steal it and use it for an episode of hashtag Life in Blissburg. So here we are. We always start with a quote, but I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to start with a question. We're going to mix it up a little bit. I want to ask, what'd you guys do over 4th of July weekend? I want to know. It was Independence Day. We're talking about freedom tonight. Tell me in the comments how you guys spent Independence Day. I'm sure probably some of you were having some conversations about freedom and independence and what it means, maybe from the macro concept of being an American, and or what it means in your families or what it means to you personally. But share, like, what'd you guys do this weekend? Therese definitely gets a lot out of these Mondays. Thank you so much for saying that, Therese. I do too. I get a lot out of you guys being here. I always learn something from you guys. So I get as much out of this as you do. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for being here. Everybody, let me know what you did. Let me know what you did this weekend. Scott and I started the weekend. We watched a bunch of movies this weekend. We watched a bunch of movies, and we're going to talk about one of those in a minute. We ate way too much food. Yeah. Who ate and drank a lot over the weekend? It was also like 187 degrees here in the Northern Virginia area. So I spent most of the weekend inside, I have to say, but not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. Um, so let me know what you guys did over the weekend. Also, I want to ask you a huge favor right now. I would love it if you would just throw up some hearts and show some love for hashtag Life in Blissburg, and also hit the share button. Hit the share button, please. It helps me get the word out. It helps me build my business. It is something that you guys can do that's totally free of charge. And you can just hit that share button and get these out to as many people as possible because, as I've mentioned before, inevitably, someone will say, hey, my friend shared this. I had never heard of you. I'd never heard of this, but I saw it for the first time. And, this one part resonated with me, and they send me a friend request, and then the rest is history. So please hit that share button. Please send up some hearts and show some love for Life in Blissburg. I'm sending big hearts out to you guys. Lots and lots of hearts from me to you. So thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. Yeah, Scott's at Hamilton. I'm going to bring that up in a second. George stayed home. Lots of fireworks viewing. Yeah, we turned on a Capitol 4th for my mom. She loves to watch fireworks. Scott says the share button is a huge help. Yes, it is. It is. It is. It is. And for people who are tuning in because they saw a friend share it, this is Life in Blissburg. It is a weekly lifestyle and informal group coaching series. And tonight we are talking about freedom. Freedom, Free to Be You and Me is the name of the show. We are going to talk about three kind of main topics tonight. We're going to talk about the nature of freedom, kind of in a quick way. What is freedom? What does it mean? Where does it come from theoretically, right? How, because it's what I do as a life coach, how freedom relates to the four pillars of wellness, and we'll review those. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about obstacles to freedom and how some of those things, the biggest ones, can sometimes be self-imposed. And those are the ones that break my heart the most, y'all. And those are the ones that I have done. I have lived these lessons. I'm sharing my wisdom, so hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. But we're going to talk about how we self-impose our own obstacles to freedom and how we can stop it, how we can stop doing that, claim our freedom, take our lives back, and live more freely and happily. Therese, oh, Joe grilled out. Yes, yes. Good food, fireworks on TV. She made some brownies. Yes, some good food, fireworks. Hey, Laura, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you guys for sharing. I love seeing what everybody did over Independence Day weekend. And now I am gonna share a quote because that was the way we normally start out. And so this quote is about freedom, obviously, and it kind of is a great segue into tonight's discussion. So the quote I want to share is by Nelson Mandela, and it's how Scott and I actually started our long holiday 4th of July Independence Day weekend. We watched the movie Cry Freedom on like Thursday night. And for those of you who haven't seen it, Cry Freedom is a movie from 1987. It is about the life of anti-apartheid activist Stephen Biko, and he's played by Denzel Washington in a brilliant performance from super early in his career. He was nominated for an Academy Award for that performance, and it got me thinking about Nelson Mandela and the anti-apartheid movement. And so I wanted a quote from Mandela for this. He's one of my heroes. He's on a piece of artwork in my living room. And so the quote we're going to kick off with tonight is this: "To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." So Nelson Mandela's wisdom is that freedom is about living in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others, which is so powerful for me, and I think so resonant and relevant to what's going on in our world right now, right? Like, freedom is not just about like me and doing whatever we want, right? Like, freedom is about the place we have as people in our communities, as people in our world, and how our freedom is shared and elevates those around us. Georgie went to her sons and grilled and swam. Yes, I saw some pictures, Georgie, of that pool party. That looked epic. I'm sorry about the fireworks upsetting Dave. I know that's hard. That's hard for some people. That is hard for some pets. as well. Puppies and kitties and the fur babies are, not big fans of those, and people who have experienced things in their lives. Fireworks aren't always a big celebration for people, so it's important for people to remember that too, I think, on holidays like this. Um, Therese also joined the group Get the Vote Out. Yes, because this is an election year, y'all. And talking about freedom, what a great organization to join and share as we're talking about freedom. I also, before we dive in too deep, want to explain for the people who are tuning in for the first time, and as a refresher for those of you who are regulars, there's a PayPal and Venmo link here for a reason. And I put those in the description because they're here for anybody who feels like they're getting something out of this, and it's a group coaching, so I'm sharing some tips and expertise from my professional world. If you are getting something out of these conversations and you want to give something back, there is a tip jar here for you to do that. And I'm a big fan of giving back as well. And what I do is every week take 10% of everything that comes into the tip jar and we give it to a charity. My husband does the same thing through his live casts on Thursdays. He is a musician and entertains the folks for an hour and a half on happy hours on Thursdays, and it's amazing. And we give back through the tip jars, 10% every week. We do a charity. I do a charity that's kind of relevant to the theme of my conversations. Sometimes Scott and I do the same ones, sometimes they're different, but 10% of that goes back into the community by way of nonprofit organizations doing amazing, amazing work. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the charity that I have chosen for tonight a little bit later in the show. But for now, let's dive in. Okay, let's dive in. So you guys have already shared the amazing fun you've had over 4th of July weekend. And I have to say I'm a little bit jealous of some of the ones who had pool parties and things like that, because I don't have a pool and I didn't spend a lot of time outside. But I want to ask you guys another question. I want to ask you to share some more stuff in the comments right now. So I want to ask you, what does freedom mean to you? What does freedom mean to you? And I also want to ask, did anybody watch Hamilton over the weekend? Scott already mentioned that. We watched Hamilton. And as you're sharing kind of your ideas and thoughts and definitions of freedom, for those of you who watched Hamilton, did it make you think any differently about freedom, about the American Revolution, about America's fight for independence? I love me some Hamilton. Where are my Hamilton peeps? Please let me know in the comments if you watched Hamilton. Even if you saw it before, maybe didn't watch it this weekend. Scott and I saw it live. We're massive Hamilton fans, so sorry if I'm boring you guys who aren't. I will move on quickly. We saw the play, the musical 3 times, watched it this weekend. And there's some great lyric lines from Hamilton about freedom. There's the raise a glass to freedom line, right? So for those of you who are drinking with me this evening, I have my wine in my Stay Fancy glass. Because that's freedom for me to be my little fancy self. So yeah, raise a glass to freedom, y'all. Cheers. Scott says the ability to choose. The ability to choose. Yeah, absolutely. Who else has some thoughts on freedom that you want to share, or who saw Hamilton? There's raise a glass to freedom, and there's also a great line from the John Lawrence character in Hamilton who says that we'll never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me. And that's a really that's like a gut punching line right there. I love, love, love that one. For me, freedom is, I'm reminded daily of what freedom means to me. I have this affirmation framed and matted and hanging on the wall of my office. And I don't know if you can see this. I don't want to get it too close because it glares and then I'm sending signals into outer space or doing something weird. But I don't know if you can see this, but it says freedom. And it says, I have the freedom and power to create the life I desire. That is what freedom means to me, to be able to create the life I desire. And so that freedom comes from a lot of different things. It comes from external sources and resources and tools. It comes from me and my own abilities, my own sort of 4 pillars of wellness, and bringing those things to bear on freedom. But that's what freedom means to me, the ability to create the life I desire. And as Scott said, the ability to choose is really heavily important as a factor in that, because if I couldn't make choices about where I live, how I live, what I do for a living. Like for me, leaving corporate America and choosing to, pursue my passions as my life's work, like that is all about creating the life I desire and having the freedom to do that. So, yeah, Teresa, she loves that line. Oh, me too, Teresa. Georgie says, the right to be me. Yeah, yeah. Tonight's theme, Georgie, absolutely. Free to be you and me. So that's a little bit about what freedom means. And I want to talk just a little bit about the nature of freedom. So, first of all, freedom is super arbitrary and conditional. So, let's not like pretend that we as Americans are the only people who are free, or have struggles with freedom, right? So, we talked about Nelson Mandela a minute ago. Countries all over the world struggle with this concept, but so it's arbitrary. It's arbitrary by virtue of where we have the privilege and luck of being born sometimes, right? And so, but it's conditional, right? Like freedom, it can be taken away from us, and freedom comes in stages. And it's also not free. Freedom isn't free. We hear that so much as it relates to our military sacrificing for our freedom, but it's also like literally true. Okay, we pay for our freedom. We pay our government to keep us safe and free. We pay for that privilege, that right of freedom. Vicky says, she was fortunate to see Hamilton and Buffalo with us. Yes. Reminds her how great our nation is, including the freedoms we have. Yes. And how we got a great start from our founding fathers. But how I believe, too, like the beautiful thing about Hamilton is it shows how freedom, it wasn't just all of these, like, great men that we think of as our founding fathers, right? It wasn't just like Washington and Jefferson. Like I learned about people in Hamilton that I didn't even know existed before, like Hercules Mulligan. Who ever heard of him before, right? Like I didn't. So it was just ordinary people, like taking up like some agency and saying like I want a different way of life. And so that's an important thing to note about freedom, right? Like freedom is governed generally by four arbiters, right? It's people who make the laws that we live under, our government, right? Which is what in Hamilton, they were rebelling against the monarch, the rule of law. Our creator, whatever we think of as our creator, so our God, our universe, whatever that means to us. So our God, our government, it's also arbitered by our social contract, right? So we talked about that a minute ago, like how we interact as people, as citizens of the world, as citizens of our community. And then it's also the fourth arbiter is us. It's us. And we are going to talk big time about the ways that we put up our own obstacles to our freedom and how we can stop doing those things and live more freely. So, for arbiters, we also think of freedom in kind of three basic ways. So, we think of the freedom of like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, all those ways that our government kind of defines it for us, right? In the Declaration of Independence, all those, like we hold these truths to be self-evident. Bill of Rights ways, right? So freedom of, freedom from, so things that we think of freedom from, like freedom from oppression, freedom from fear, those kinds of things. And then freedom to do things, freedom to make choices, freedom to, do and act and live and work and play and love all the ways that we want, right? Georgie asks a question. Do I think with all that's going on in the world, our freedom is gradually being taken away? Georgie, that is a great question. And I can only answer that from my personal perspective. And I think the answer to that is no. I like to be a big picture thinker. And I like to look at the trajectory of our world and our nation and our personal freedoms over the course of time. And I believe that, yeah, we'll have setbacks. I believe that, we are seeing some things right now happening. We are seeing people recognize that things haven't always been equal and free for everybody. And so there's some stuff happening about that in the world, and people are kind of waking up to that fact. But I also see that, we've made huge strides over our history as a whole, and the trajectory is moving upward. From, the abolition of slavery, for the most part, to, women's rights, to LGBTQ rights, to all of the ways that our freedoms have been enhanced. I think the trajectory is a positive one. So I don't think we're losing freedoms. I think we're being asked to make some sacrifices for the greater good. But I don't think sacrifice is a loss of freedom. I think that's part of the social contract that we have as citizens of the world, as citizens of our country, and we are being called upon to make some sacrifices for the greater good and for the vulnerable in our society. And so, the answer to that is, the short answer is no. I think our trajectory is our country and our nation has and our people have become more free. I think we have setbacks that we have to face and address, but I'm hopeful and I believe that the overall trajectory is positive. So I hope that answers your question, and thank you for asking that. That is a great question to ask. So we talked a little bit about the nature of freedom, right? The four arbiters, the ways that we think about freedom: freedom from, freedom of, freedom to, the ways our freedom is arbitrated by, our creator, our government, the social contract, which is what, Georgie kind of just asked about, and then ourselves. Ourselves. And I really want to dig into that because this is the one that we can control for the most part. The ways that we can sometimes play a role in holding up our own freedom. And those are the ones that hurt my heart the most. But first I want to talk about, there are ways that freedom is really closely related to the four pillars of wellness. And that's what I do as a life and wellness coach. So I help people kind of bring alignment to their lives in those areas, and freedom is a big part of that. So let's talk about really briefly, how does freedom relate to those four pillars of wellness? And for those of you who were here in May, back when we talked about each of those things over the course of 4 different weeks during Mental Health Awareness Month, who remembers the four pillars of wellness? Oh, Georgia, you're welcome. I'm glad I was able to answer that. I hope it was helpful. So who remembers the four pillars of wellness? They are mental wellness, emotional wellness, physical wellness, and spiritual wellness. And freedom plays a role in all of those. So let's talk about what that means. So how about mental wellness? How does freedom play a role in our mental wellness? So we have the freedom to think, right? What we want. Like, our thoughts are our own. And that there's a process there, like where we draw mental conclusions based on a thought process. So that is freedom of mental wellness, our thought process. So that is how mental wellness relates to freedom. Number 2 is emotional wellness. And that really looks like the freedom to experience and express our emotions really fully. And if you remember, for those of you who were here for that discussion back in May, it's about, not denying our feelings, right? Like feeling the feels, all of the feels, like the hard ones, the bad ones, but processing them and moving through them in a way that's healthy, that's not destructive, internally or externally, but feeling all the feels. So that freedom, the freedom to feel, the freedom to have emotions, express them, and experience them is freedom that is related to emotional wellness. Third is physical wellness. So what does freedom as it relates to physical wellness looks like? That is about how we nurture our bodies, right? Our freedom to eat what we want, to exercise or not, how we move. But it's also like physical freedom, like to move around, how we work, how we live, how we play, how we love, right? Like all of those sort of physical contexts in our world. So the freedom to do and act in ways that are our own. And then the fourth way that freedom relates to a pillar of wellness is spiritually. And what does that mean? So that is freedom to believe, freedom of our faith. And people often ask, so what's the difference between thinking and believing? And so there's a small but important distinction there. So freedom of thought is that sort of mental process that we talked about, right? Like drawing a set of conclusions, thinking something. Our beliefs or our faith are kind of like that, like insistence in the truth of something where there may not be evidence or a thought process that led us there. It's just like, it's a feeling, it's our faith. So that's the difference. So those are the 4 ways that freedom relates to the 4 pillars of wellness. So mental, through our thinking and thought process; emotional, through our freedom to feel, experience and express emotions. Third, physically, to do and act, live, love, work, play in the ways that we want. And fourth, spiritually, to believe and have faith in the ways that we want. And now we're going to talk about obstacles to freedom, and we're going to spend kind of the biggest chunk of our time talking about those obstacles. And there are kind of two categories of those. So there are external obstacles to freedom and internal obstacles to freedom. Who has thoughts on external obstacles to freedom? Who like external ways that like our freedom is restricted externally? Share in the comments if you have any thoughts on that. External barriers to freedom. There's some obvious ones, right? Like if you break a law and you lose your freedom, you're incarcerated, you go to jail. That's one way that we can externally lose our freedom, right? Freedom is also regulated by laws, right? So we can't just do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want to do it, right? There's the social contract of our communities. So those external ways. There's also another important one that is external, but it also stems from an internal source. And I just want to mention it because we're going to come back to it a little bit later. But it's also debt. So when we hear the term debt-ridden, that's like an external barrier to freedom. That is encumbering our money. It is a legal obligation. It is a financial obligation. And it is one that in a lot of ways has gotten out of control. For a lot of people, and it is external, and there are some things that we can't get around, right? Like a place to live, so mortgages, car payments, transportation, those kinds of things. But then there's like reckless spending, right? That leaves us debt ridden, and so we're going to talk about that as in a way of our internal, our self-imposed barrier to freedom is also an external one. So those are a couple examples of external barriers to freedom, but I want to talk mostly about our internal ones. And you guys, these are the ones that hurt my heart. These are the insidious ways that we, through our own unconsciousness, relinquish our freedom, diminish our individual selves, and stifle our truth, right? And this month we are talking about living our truth. And these are some ways that we give it up, and maybe we don't even realize it. We don't even think about it. It is unconscious, but it is stifling our truth. It is relinquishing our freedom, and it is truly inhibiting our independence. And I'm going to talk about 3 ways that we do that and how we can stop doing that, because it causes us harm in the long run. It causes us harm. We are living not as freely as we could, not as healthfully as we could, and we do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves, and so these are things that we can just stop doing. And the first one I want to talk about is people pleasing. Who has been like, oh my God, I am a people pleaser and it drives me crazy and I don't know how to get out of that loop? Raise your hand. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been a people pleaser and you've recognized it and you're like, oh, this is a cycle I have to break. I've been there, you guys. Georgie says not being able to go into places without a mask, having it be mandatory. Yeah, that's as external. It's an external, barrier. And yeah, a lot of people have, some opinions about that right now. And what that means is it relates to freedom. What it means is it relates to the social contract we have with each other as good citizens, as caring about others in our communities. So the internal ones, let's talk about those, because those are things that we can do something about, right? Yeah. Yes. People pleasers. Oh my gosh. Georgie, yes. Therese, yes. Me, been there, you guys, been there. And this one is, it's one of those things that we can almost we can push it off. We can blame other people for this one. We can be like, well, they want me to do this and they need me to do this and I have to be there for them in all of these ways. And what do? We make excuses, right? We make excuses and we continue to people please. and we give pieces and pieces and pieces of ourselves away. And I'm not talking about the ways that we do it willingly and from our hearts as places of being caregivers, because I know some of us here are caregivers. I'm a caregiver. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people pleasing, the unnecessary people pleasing that we do in our lives, right? The ways that we scrape and strive to make people happy that, you know what, sometimes no matter what we do, not going to be happy, not going to be happy. Y'all, I've been there. I said I would share some stories from my life, and I have a quick one. Like, I have some relatives who have opinions about the way I live my life and the things I do, and I could cure cancer. And those people would think I'm doing it wrong. Um, and I used to get all kinds of spun up about that. I used to feel all kinds of ways about that. And I used to try to explain myself. And this is what people pleasing looks like, right? It's trying to explain why we do the things we do, because we have to make them understand. Like, we have to please them. We have to make them feel okay about us. Well, you know what? It's not our job to make other people feel okay about us. It's just not. And it's not their job to feel okay about us. Like, the beauty of it is they don't have to, and we don't have to. And so, one of the wonderful ways that we can kind of stop doing that is remembering what our own core values are. Remembering our own core values. And we talked about those a couple times in other episodes, but knowing what sort of our ethics are, what our life code is, and living by that, and saying, you know what, if I'm being criticized for something, if I have somebody asking me to explain something or feeling some kind of way about something I do, I know what my core values are, and I'm living those, and I'm living the best life I can, and it's not my job or your job or anybody else's job to explain that to somebody who doesn't get it. Scott says, if you try to please everyone, most of the time you please no one. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That is so true. That is so true. If we try to please everyone, everybody's going to be mad. Everybody's going to be mad about something. We're going to do something wrong for somebody all the time, right? So the only people we truly need to please are ourselves, and the people that we really love, like the people who are in it with us, right? Like the people who, like, I work so hard to make these episodes relevant and to make this be something that you guys can take away and learn from, right? I care about what you all think because I'm here to serve you. I'm obsessed with helping people live better lives. So that matters to me. But here is, like, I'm going to drop Scott posted something earlier, and he's like, tune in tonight, my wife's gonna drop some knowledge, and it's a line from Hamilton, if you haven't seen it. So we're back to our quoting Hamilton with everything we do lives right now. I'm gonna drop some knowledge. I'm gonna drop a truth bomb right now, and this is one of the, like, top 3 most important pieces of advice I ever heard in my life, and it helped me stop the people pleasing. And it is this: don't let the people in the cheap seats have an expensive opinion about your life. Don't let the people in the cheap seats have an expensive opinion about your life. And I wish I could claim that as an original thought, but I can't. I heard it for the first time on a Rachel Hollis podcast a couple years ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, rewind. And I'm like, yes. Yes. And what she means by that is, like, the people who aren't in it with us, the people who are, like, at a distance, who don't know our lives, who don't know the things that we go through, who don't have a clue about what it means to walk in our shoes, but have opinions about it anyway. And the people that we try to please for all those different reasons, they don't get to have a say. They don't get to have a say. And if we recognize that this tendency, this striving and scraping that we're doing right now and trying to please somebody is about somebody that has nothing to do with, like, who we are and what our life is, doesn't get to happen. Doesn't get to happen. So we core value. We say people in cheap seats. No, don't get an opinion. And the third one is, like, boundaries, setting boundaries and sticking to them, saying no, and, like, That's it. Saying no. And not feeling like we have to explain it or apologize for it, but just saying, like, no. And being honest and saying, like, rather than, oh, I can't do that today, I'm so sorry. Like, no, I don't have the capacity to do that right now. I am prioritizing these things, knowing what we want to focus on and focusing on that. And I'm not saying we do that to the detriment of all else. I talked about the social contract. I talked about being good citizens, good family members, good friends, but there's a limit. And those are the people in our tribes and our cores that matter and we take into account. But the people pleasing, the strangers, the comments on the internet, the relatives that live 500 miles away and are like, did I see you somewhere without a what were you doing? Why don't you ever answer your phone? No, they don't get an opinion. So people pleasing, one, and those are 3 ways to stop doing it. Number two, before we move on, what people think about me is none of my business. Yes, Georgie, preach. So important. Vicky says, a lot of times those who judge are simply jealous. Yeah, true. I also read, this reminded me, Vicky, of another great quote. I'm a big quote person. There is a quote that says, you will never be criticized by someone doing more than you. The people that have like the chatter and the things to say are always the people who like aren't doing as much and have no idea, right? So yes, Vicky, thank you for that reminder. Very, very true. So good. And I see some other people echoing that. So yes, and this is what I mean, you guys. I get as much out of this as you do. Like, I'm always reminded of something important. I learn new things. Your input is so valuable here and so helpful to each other as well. And so thank you for that. This engagement, this community is everything. So thank you. The second self-imposed obstacle to freedom I want to talk about is being doubt-ridden. So we talked about debt-ridden a couple minutes ago, when through reckless spending, we just pile up excessive debt. I want to talk about another self-imposed form, which is being doubt-ridden, which is very similar to debt in that it is compounding. So debt, you have compounding interest and you start paying interest on the interest on the interest if you don't pay off, debt right away. Doubt is the same thing because it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And one doubt feeds another, feeds the next, and it just reinforces everything that came before it. What does this look like? It's all of the like, I'm not enoughs, right? All of those, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not talented enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not brave enough. All of those things are the doubts. Those are our self-doubts. And they charge us compounding interest, you guys. They charge us compounding interest. So how can we stop having doubts? Because it's hard, right? We've all had doubt. We all have doubts, right? That I'm not enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. I said I would share some stories. I have one for this too, you guys. I got a story for everything. And I may have shared a little bit about this before, but it was, back in February, I was kicking around the ideas then of how do I serve a bigger community through my coaching. And Scott was like, you should do video. And I was just like, this was before the pandemic. I was doing one-on-one client coaching and I was just like, video, no. And I just kind of dismissed it. And I had a friend over one day, and this was like back in February, right before, March hit and the pandemic hit and all the things. And we were talking about things that we weren't doing that we wanted to do. And I brought up, like coaching in a bigger way and with more people. And I said, like, I can't, like, Scott's trying to get me to do video. And I'm just like, you guys, like, I can't, I'm not telegenic. Like, I'm not thin enough. Like, I hate the way I look in pictures and video and like all the things. And there is no way in hell I am like going in front of a camera and trying to coach people. And I wouldn't feel strong. I wouldn't feel smart. Like, I just wouldn't I'm not any of the things enough to do that. Like I've seen people do it. Like, you know, we all have flipped through our, you know, influencer galleries, right? Like I quote, you know, I've done conferences with Rachel Hollis. She's somebody who's just so like great on camera and in public. And I'm just like, God, I could never be that person. And I just didn't do it. And then the pandemic came along and I saw needs in places. And I'm like, you know what? My own insecurities are holding me up here. And they're not serving anybody. They're not serving me, and they're not serving the people who are saying, like, we need a forum to talk about things that we're going through and to learn some tools and to get some support. And so finally, I just said, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And I don't care that I gained, you know, 5 pounds during quarantine. I don't care like that I haven't had my roots done in, you know, 4 months or whatever. Like I'm just gonna do it. And the doubt evaporated, and you guys helped that evaporate. But I also had to break through that self-imposed obstacle myself to be able to get there. I was holding myself back. And once I did that and I saw like I can actually have an impact this way, it got easier and easier and easier every time. And you guys are so, so sweet. Thank you so much, Trace, for saying that. That means a lot to me. And you know, you get more confident and comfortable the more times you do something, the repetition of it, the realization that it's not as scary as you made it out to be. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But so being doubt ridden, right? Like we've all been there. We've all had self doubts about something on some level, whether it was, you know, getting up and speaking in front of a room, or going back to school, or applying for a bigger, you know, job or promotion or something. Like, oh, am I really qualified for that? Am I like good enough? Am I, you know, should I do this? And so how do we overcome that? So how do we overcome that? And the first thing I always like to do is try to figure out what the source of those doubts is. So look for the, where is this coming from, right? Like, is this stemming from like something that, you know, like, did somebody tell me once that like, God, you look horrible in pictures? I don't know, maybe. But where do these fears come from? You know, is it childhood? Is it something, you know, did our parents like, you know, kind of put a little light out in some way by saying like, oh, you can't do that. You're not, you know, you're not this or you're not that. You know, were we defined in some way as kids? Was it a parent or a bully that like said we weren't this enough to do this thing, and we've let that stay with us? So what's the source? And understanding sort of where the doubt is coming from. And if it's external, let's just do the things that we did with the people pleasing and say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because those people don't know me. Those people don't know what's in here, right? So we understand the source, and what else can we do? We can reframe the negatives. We can reframe the negatives if we're saying to ourselves like, oh God, I could never like speak on video in front of an audience of people live on Facebook. Like I could never do that. I could never apply for a job where I manage, you know, a team of 10. I could never like speak in front of a room full of people. I could never go back to school at my age. Whatever the thing is, reframe it. Reframe it in a positive and say, well, what can we do? And looking for examples of other people who have done these things. Jennifer just tuned in and said, oh, she's missing the lives again, overwhelmed with COVID. Oh, Jennifer is one of our frontline workers in the healthcare industry. And my friend, we are going to give you a pass for missing and being late. You can catch the replay. Be safe, and, you know, just take care of yourself and take care of your patients and the work that you're doing. And thank you for letting us know that you were here and that you'll catch the replay. Lisa says she struggles with the belief that she's mediocre at everything and everyone is better than me, so I shouldn't try. Yeah, gosh, Lisa, thank you for sharing that. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, that everybody's better at this than me, or everybody's done this before, or yeah. Negative self-talk, Jennifer said, is powerful. Oh, so powerful. And Jennifer, we're talking about ways to overcome. So we're in the self-imposed obstacles to freedom section of tonight's talk, and we're talking about 3 ways that we put up our own barriers and how we can, stop doing the things. And so we're talking about doubt, being doubt ridden, and how doubt compounds and compounds and compounds like debt. So if we think of doubt as like a personal debt and how it just builds and builds and builds and builds, if we don't like chip away at it, it gets out of control, right? It gets out of control. So think about the source, where it comes from. If it's external, like these are the people in the cheap seats that we talked about before, right? They don't get an opinion. If it's from childhood, oh my gosh, please know it is so not relevant to the person that you are today. Whatever happened in childhood, whatever that bully told you, or a parent told you, or another relative or someone told you, has nothing to do with the person that you are now. And even if it's something that happened more recently, or an off the cuff comment that somebody made that is making you feel insecure or doubt yourself in some way, just remind yourself, you know what? They don't know what I'm capable of. They don't know what I'm capable of, and prove them wrong. Prove them wrong. So flip that ticker in our head, right? That negative self-talk, that reel in our minds that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're, as Lisa said, we're mediocre and everybody is better at this than us. Like, no, you know what? Yeah, there might be some people who are more credentialed, who have been doing this longer, who seem smoother at it, but you know what? Nobody is going to do something the way we would do it. Nobody is going to do something the way we would do it. Even if 100 other people have done it, even if there are people that, yep, they're maybe better at it, nobody's going to do it the way we do it. Georgie says, in her almost 70 years of life, if she's learned one thing, it's that everyone has their own special gifts. Yes, Georgie, thank you for sharing that wisdom. It is so important. We all do. We all have our own special gifts, and nobody is going to do something the way we do it. So let's just go for it. Let's go for it. Let's crush those doubts, consider the sources of them, reframe them, reframe those can'ts, shouldn'ts, didn'ts, nevers into things that we can do, ways that we can learn, ways that we can grow. It's about a growth mindset, right? That we've talked about before. And dwell in possibility. That's the third way to overcome this one. Just dwell in the possible, right? So something is only impossible if we say it is. If we say it is. So if we say it's possible, then it's that too. It's that instead. So dwell in the possibility, not in the impossibility. So overcoming our doubts. The third one I want to talk about, we've alluded to a little bit already. It is fear. Fear. So people pleasing, being doubt ridden, and fear. And fear can be the strongest one of all, because we can find a million ways to rationalize not doing something because we're afraid of it. I have a story for this one too, you guys. And it's a way that has made my life smaller. I am afraid to fly. I am afraid to fly in airplanes. I'm an earth sign. I'm a Virgo. I like my feet on the ground. Like, I hate flying. I willingly don't fly. So I had a job in a previous life where I did, PR, and I had to travel a ton. Traveled all around the country, months and months and months out of the year, frequently, all over, coast to coast to coast to coast, and everywhere in between, doing events. And I hated the flying. I never got over it. They're well, if you fly more, it's that aversion therapy thing, you just get used to it. Every time we would take off, and you would feel that little, oh God, just no, we're gonna crash. The plane's just gonna fall out of the sky right now. I can't do this. I hate flying. And it's made my life smaller, right? I travel to places that I don't have to fly to willingly because I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about flying over the ocean. I don't want to think about super, super duper long flights. I make Scott and I drive everywhere. Everywhere we go, we drive the car to. And it has made my life very small. And especially now that there are externally imposed travel restrictions on us, I think about God, I gave up the freedom to travel willingly, and now it's we can't travel even if we wanted to some of these places, and it kind of bums me out a little bit. And so I've made a promise to myself to be braver about that and kind of overcome those fears. Teresa's saying her father always told us that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Those with strengths should help those with weaknesses. Yes, we all have something to share. It's what Georgie said goes hand in hand with that, right? Like we all have special gifts, we all have strengths, and we can help people with weaknesses in those areas, and people with strengths in other areas can help where we have weaknesses. So it's ways that, like, if you were here last week when we were talking about the book of joy and reciprocal altruism, like we help each other. We help each other overcome these things, right? That's like what we're here for. Um, so fear. So fear can make our lives really small. Fear can hold us back from doing so many things, right? Like flying and traveling is one example. But it's also all the things that like we can have doubts about, right? And we like make excuses about why, well, I don't want to go for this job because I'm afraid of like all the responsibility that's going to come with it. Like, what if I can't handle that? Or I'm not going to, do live shows and, try to coach people or use this forum because, oh my God, what if I'm like, what if there's a troll and somebody's like really mean and, they say all these horrible things? Or what if like I look really stupid or I like, I don't know, like spill my water all over myself? Or what if, like we make up all of we create like scenarios, right? We make up fears, we make up things that haven't happened as excuses for not doing something, right? So fear is just a bunch of created scenarios that like aren't even real, right? Aren't even real. Um, and I'm talking about like irrational fears of something, right? Like I'm not talking about ignoring like science and evidence to the contrary of something and saying, well, I can pick up this like angry boa constrictor or angry rattlesnake and, center my love on it and it's not going to bite me. Like, no, I'm not talking about that kind of like, just face your fear. Like, not, I'm talking about the irrational kind of fear, right? The things where we create these scenarios about something in our heads that aren't even reality. So, how can we overcome that? How can we overcome irrational fears to live more freely, to live more full lives? 3 ways. 1, lean into that fear. Lean into that fear, like feel it. I learned this from a business coach I worked with a couple years ago who's brilliant and wise. Kira Fenderson, if you catch this on replay, I don't see you here tonight, but if you ever tune in, yeah, you've been an inspiration and are still one. And she, I was feeling fear about, I can't even remember what it was now. And she's like, well, what are all the things that can happen? Why aren't you doing that? What are all the things that can go wrong? Like, I want you to just like lean into them, write them down, talk about them, like explore like all into the very ends of those things and get familiar with it and then do it anyway. And then do it anyway. And I'm like, well, that's easier said than done. And what I realized is that in playing out like all of these irrational, crazy scenarios that I was creating in my own head, that like, gosh, I really am just making up all this stuff. I really am just making up all of this stuff, and it is irrational fear. So sometimes working through all of those worst case scenarios actually helps us see how irrational the fear is. So lean into it, work through it, do it in the extreme and kind of come through the other side, right? It's like working through emotions. Sometimes we just have to play them out and let them run their course. And then we'll come out on the other side. So that's one way. Another way, again, I want to go back to considering the source. So where's the fear coming from, right? So my fear of flying, like what does that stem from? Like, was I ever in a plane crash? Do I know somebody who was in a plane crash? No. I mean, I've read about plane crashes, but I know like intellectually they don't happen frequently, right? So I know intellectually I'm more likely to have a car accident than a plane crash. So like understanding where the fear comes from. Was it a past failure? Like I don't want to change jobs because the last time I did that, like, I hated it, or, the company wasn't what I thought they were and I, wasn't happy there. Or I don't want to go back to school because when I was, in college the first time, like I just, I didn't do that well. Or, I don't want to try something new because, like the last time I did, I just, fell on my face, or I can't speak in front of a room. Like what is the data that we have, right? Like where is this coming from? So what's the source? Is it a past failure? Is it past trauma? So if it's a past trauma that informs things in a little bit more of a deeper way, we should work through that trauma and understand how that plays into our current mindset and why we're, having fear around doing certain things, and like releasing that trauma so that it loosens our fear, and allows us to live more freely and fully. But understanding the source and overcoming the source, really important second way. And then the third way, and especially as it relates to like doing things for the first time, as I talked about with doing these live casts, whether it's going to school or applying for a new job, or like broadening your reach with a live video or whatever it is. Third tip: over prepare. Like, just do so much work that like things inside and out, and you feel like grounded in knowledge and preparation. And if it's like a job interview, you research the company and you write down all the questions and you do all the things, and you over prepare so that you feel more knowledgeable, so that you build confidence. I'm a big, like, gosh, you make notes. Like, I prepare for these live shows because I did have fear around it. I did have self doubt around it. And I wanted to be able to overcome that. I want to be able to feel confident and capable when I, sit here. And even though we're like an amazing, friendly group, like, I want to, I'm here because I have some expertise to share, and I want to be grounded in that. So I prepare. I take notes and I write things down and I make sure I know what I want to say. So over preparation. So lean into it, understand the source of it, and over prepare. So those are the three like biggest ways that we impose our own obstacles to freedom: the people pleasing, the doubts, and the fear, and some ways to overcome them. I'll share those in show notes, through a blog post that will drop when my newsletter goes out later this week. If you are not a subscriber to the newsletter, what are you waiting for? Sign up for the newsletter. The link to my website is in the description of the show. There will be a pop-up. There's also a link in the footer of my website to subscribe to the newsletter. You will typically get 2 messages from me a week. One of them is the weekly e-newsletter, and the other one is the invitation to these weekly live shows. So I don't spam people. I'm not sending you stuff every single day of the week. I'm not sending you 2 and 3 things a day. Like, twice a week, maybe in like an off week there might be a third, but I can't even think of the last time it was that. So like at the most, like 2 things a week. So that is the bulk of the content. I hope this was helpful. I want to talk a little bit about the charity that I chose for tonight, because tonight's topic is freedom, free to be you and me. The charity, for those of you who have been very, very generous and supported with donations this week. I also want to say thank you. I forgot to do my thank yous, and I meant to do that at the top of the show. And so I want to express gratitude to Georgie, to Vicky, to Therese, and to Rose for your generous support last week. Thank you so, so much. The tips help me to continue the creation and delivery of this content, to keeping the show going, to keeping my work going, and it also allows me to give back. And the charity that I chose this week is the Innocence Project. And the Innocence Project is 100% dedicated to restoring freedom to people who have been wrongly convicted and incarcerated, who are actually innocent of the crimes for which they have been convicted. So they use DNA evidence to exonerate the wrongfully convicted and incarcerated. They also do work to reform the criminal justice system to prevent future injustice. And you guys, they have some amazing statistics. Since their founding in 92, they have freed and exonerated 367 individuals, 21 of whom were on death row. 367 people got their freedom back, 21 of whom were on death row. And the average length of incarceration for their clients was a period of 14 years. 14 years of someone's life taken away for something they didn't do. The Innocence Project, you guys, that is where 10% of the tip jar money is going to tonight. So thank you for that. Lisa, thank you so much for saying that about the newsletter. I love creating the newsletter. The newsletter is called the Bliss List, and there's like 5 standing topics that are in like each one. There's like a feature article that links back to a blog post for the week. There's a tool time where I share like a tech tool or some kind of tool that we can use to enhance our lives in some way. There's mixed media where I talk about books or a documentary or a film or something like that. There is make it a habit. So there is a habit one or something that we can do every day or habitually, repetitively to sort of add something to our lives. And then I do a quote of the week in the newsletter. So Lisa, thank you for that. Lisa also says, in This Is Us, they do their worst case scenario. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Scott said great writers like Bob Dylan and Guy Clark often write 4 to 5 extra verses so they have more to choose from for the final song. Yeah, it's the over preparing thing, right? And Therese, thank you. Yeah, I love the Innocence Project too. So much great work they do. And so that is where 10% of the tip jar is going tonight. I also want to share some other resources for those of you who are like me and big nerds and want to explore topics a little bit further. I have some things to share. The first one is the book that inspired the title for tonight. It's the Free to Be You and Me book that was the project of Marlo Thomas and the Ms. Foundation for Women. This is like their 35th anniversary edition of it. It actually comes with a CD, although I don't have a CD player. I don't know who has CD players anymore, but if you do, the book comes with one, but it's filled with adorable song lyrics. It's a great gift for little ones. It's a great gift for parents or grandparents who have a role in the lives of littles. So Free to Be You and Me, one of the resources I want to share. Also, for me, the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love. Remember the phenomenon from a couple years ago? It was the Julia Roberts movie as well. Her book Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear. It's not just for creatives among us. This is like how to move through fear regardless of what it is you want to do and just live in a bigger, bolder, more real, authentic way. Love this writer and love this book. Big Magic. And I also want to share something really cute. It's kind of my fun thing, and they're affirmations. And so I said I have an affirmation that I shared earlier framed on the wall in my office, but there's also these affirmators cards, okay? And these are hilarious and adorable at the same time. You can probably see they have a unicorn, a bunny riding a unicorn, and a rainbow on the front. So there's going to be some fun here. And also, as you've heard me say before, they're gold and sparkly and shiny, and I will buy anything that is gold and sparkly and shiny. But inside this box is 50 affirmation cards to help you help yourself without the self-helpiness. So they're cute and clever and funny, and they're affirmations and just things that can help us. Like what I do sometimes is I'll just draw one. If I'm feeling like a little bit or in a funk or my brain isn't working, I take little white space breaks sometimes, and I'll pull a card out of here and just read what it says, and it can help me think of something in a new way or see a new angle of something or remind myself to get out of a funk in a particular way. And I wanted to read one to you guys tonight. So I want to share this. It's adorable little picture of popcorn, bag of popcorn and little popcorns all around it. And it's the joy card. Okay, so it's so relevant to life in Blissburg. It's the joy card. And this is an affirmation to remind us about joy. And it says, to enjoy something, I simply need to add joy to it. Joy is like butter. I can put it on anything and it'll make it way better. Today, I will add joy to everything. Really slather it on. Today, I am the Orville Redenbacher of joy. And life's popcorn is about to get it. So you guys, these things are adorable. I got them on Amazon. They are designed and written by an artist, actress, podcaster named Susie Barrett. She's hilarious. There's a bunch of different decks of these affirmators. There's ones for work and love, and these are just kind of the general ones, but so cute. And they all have little illustrations too. And there's 50 of them in the pack. So there's, they go a long way. So those are the resources. I also want to remind you guys, I am a life coach. I am a mindset coach and lifestyle designer, certified integrative life and wellness coach. And I have a program called the Mindset Makeover. So if anyone struggles more deeply needs some, additional help, and it may not be you, but if even there's a friend that you have and you're like, you know what, you talk to them and they're like, gosh, I've thought about doing life coaching. Please, recommend me to friends. Ping me if you ever want to dig more deeply into issues. It's not even as much about like needing, to get over like hard stuff, but I have a lot of clients who are like in major life transitions, or they want to start a business for the first time, or they've experienced a loss and need some additional support to get through things. So we run the gamut of things that we can help clients through, but from a life coaching perspective. So it's about getting clarity on goals, setting goals, creating habits and consistency to achieve them, and really being able to see like some movement in the needles of our lives. So it's another resource I just want to remind you guys that is there. I do free 30-minute telephone consultations as well. So if you just want to, ping me and say, hey, I'd like to talk about, like, I don't know if life coaching is even for me, but I want to talk about like what you think, and here are some ways that I'm thinking like I might be able to use it. Feel free to ping me. We can have a 30-minute conversation, no strings attached, and absolutely no charge. So those are some things that I wanted to share. A reminder about my e-newsletter as well. And I also just want to throw in another reminder that our July Blissberg Book Club pick is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. This is going to be the culmination of our July Live Your Truth month, and we're going to talk about that book on July 27th. But you're not going to have to read the book to be able to participate in that, but of course we always encourage reading the book. Thank you guys so much. We are going to be back here next week. It is going to be the second week of our July Live Your Truth theme. Next week we are going to be answering a powerful question as part of our theme. And that question is, who aren't you? Who aren't you? As part of living your truth. So thank you guys so much for spending this first Monday of July with me. Georgie, George, Therese, Bob, everyone, Vicky. Thank you, Lisa, Jennifer. See us on the replay. Those of you who I didn't see in the comments, I'm sorry if I missed anyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back here next week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Monday for another episode of Life in Blissberg, July, Live Your Truth. I'll see you then. Until then, be good to each other and be good to yourselves. Good night.